Saint Anthony is one of the most frequently invoked saints. Catholics are almost constantly asking for his intercession. And this is because he is the saint of a very relatable thing. He is the patron saint of lost objects, of lost things. And by virtue of this, Saint Anthony is practically the patron saint of my life. Many Catholics, and even non-Catholics, feel the same. Because when you lose your keys, or your glasses, or a notebook with an address in it, or a USB drive with stories on it that you do not have backed up anywhere else, or maybe a cup of tea that you know you just poured, but now you have no idea where you put it, Saint Anthony is frequently the saint that you turn to for help. But what if, instead of forgetting where you've put your blue ceramic mug that you're sure you just had, what if you find yourself in a tiny, cobbled Italian street, in a tiny Italian town, and you have no idea where you are? There's no one around, you do not know what direction you came from, and the only thing that you do know is that you need to reach a specific bus terminal in a limited amount of time, or else the tour bus will leave, and you will be abandoned in this tiny Italian town, and you are lost. You do not know where that bus terminal is, and you are not going to find that bus terminal in time, because you have no idea where you are. And so, you could very well become stranded in Italy. So, what would be the logical course of action? Well, Saint Anthony, being both the patron saint of lost things and being Italian, is simply the logical person to ask for help in this scenario. Now, despite the very unique and specific circumstances involved for a person to find themselves in such a situation, it turned out that one of our friends, Jeanne, did actually find herself in this specific scenario. And Jeanne, being a good Catholic, did what any good Catholic, or frankly, slightly cultured person, would do, and finding herself lost in this tiny Italian street, she said, "Saint Anthony, where are you? Don't you know that we're lost? Do something!" And so, this is Jeanne's Saint Anthony story. Our good friend Jeanne, who is, at the time of this recording, 102 years old, has many interesting stories from her past, many to do with Saint Anthony, but this is perhaps one of the most unique Saint Anthony stories in Jeanne's repertoire. She recounted this story to me and several other of her friends when we were over at her house when she was only 100 years old, so quite young. But this is the story. She said that she had a good friend named Lena, who, though she lived in Canada, was originally from Italy. And Lena would quite often go back to Italy to visit her relatives there. And so one year, when Lena was making her Italian visit, she invited her friends from Canada, Jeanne and Marie, to go with her. And so when she invited Jeanne to go to Italy, Jeanne of course said yes. She would never pass up on going on a trip to Italy. So Jeanne and Marie went with Lena, and they were going to go there for about 6 weeks. They planned a bus trip from Rome to northern Italy, and then they were going to go through Switzerland and down into southern Italy, where the boot is. Their first stop when they arrived in Italy was to visit Lena's brother, who was a priest. And so they stayed at this rectory, and they visited Lena's brother and the other priests there, and they could see the Vatican in the distance from the rectory. So it was the full Catholic Italian experience. Almost the full Catholic Italian experience. That comes a little bit later. But there were priests, there was a rectory, there was the Vatican, they were in Italy. It was very cool. So they were there for 1 week and they helped out with chores and stuff. And the second week they spent traveling through Italy by bus. And so they were doing that. They were on the bus and were traveling when the guide said, "Well, we're approaching a little town called Rapello, and this is your chance to use the washroom. We are going to stop at this little town and use their facilities. I would advise you to perhaps have a bit of lunch to pay for our stead. Like, go enjoy Italy and check out this little town." And so Lena said, "Well, we're on this bus, and we're about the last ones to get off. We'll be the last in the lines to the washroom, and I don't want to wait around for 45 minutes. And Lena knew Italy very well. So she said to her 2 Canadian friends, "I know that there's a nice lace shop around here, so let's go check out the lace shop, and then we'll come back." So Lena, Marie, and Jeanne went to the lace shop. Lena got lost in the lace pretty quickly, and was just looking through the lace, and so Marie said to Jeanne, "Jeanne, I really need to use the washroom." And so Jeanne said, "Well, I don't know this place, but there should be somewhere where there's washrooms, so let's go down the street." Well, little did Jeanne know that the street they were on was a circular street going around a mountain. There were no cross streets, and they just started walking and walking on this little cobblestone street. And the street was very small. It was not wide enough for 2 cars to even meet. There were houses on both sides, and all the houses were connected with a stoop. So on both sides, the street was enclosed by these houses. And they walk and walk. Nothing. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, siesta time. No cats, no dogs, no people. Shades are drawn, the doors are closed, and Jeanne and Marie continue to walk. Finally, Jeanne said, "We're lost. We're not going anywhere. We're going to miss our bus." Now, the bus is actually sort of important here. Because if you miss the bus, well, you miss the bus. If Jeanne and Marie don't get back to where the bus is on a schedule. It can't wait for them. So Jeanne and Marie are both lost and on a time limit. So Jeanne, as any good Catholic would, says, "Saint Anthony, where are you anyway? Now show yourself. Don't you know we're lost? Do something," Jeanne yells out into the empty Italian street. All of a sudden, there was a man standing on the street, with his foot on the stoop of a house, facing the house. Jeanne said to Marie, "Where did he come from?" Marie said, "I don't know. I never saw him before." So Jeanne went up to him, and tried to ask in limited Italian, "Excuse me, sir, but we're lost." The man said, "You speak English?" Jeanne said, "Yes," and just about hugged him. So he backed up a bit and said, "Keep going the way you're going. You'll come to an opening in the wall. It's full of graffiti. It's dark. Do not be afraid. You go in. There's a light, very dim. Keep to the right. Do not take the left branch. Go straight out. You will see the light at the end of the tunnel, and your bus will be waiting for you." Jeanne said, "Thank you. Thank you so much." So the man turned around and he started leaving, and Jeanne grabbed Marie's hand and she said, "Come on, let's find that opening." They started walking, and then Jeanne said, "Oh, why didn't I ask him how far we have to walk before we find this opening in the wall?" So Jeanne turned around to ask him, but there was nobody there. There was not a soul around. The man was gone. No doors had opened, no doors had closed, but he just wasn't there. So Jeanne said to Marie, That was St. Anthony. Now come on, let's find that opening. So Jeanne grabbed Marie's hand, and they began to walk. They reached the opening in the wall in very little time, perhaps a few minutes walking. And there it was, a dark, gaping, foreboding hole, with graffiti all around the opening. Marie said, "I'm not going in there, it's pitch dark." Jeanne said, "He said that it was dark. He said, don't be afraid." So Jeanne grabbed Marie's hand and said, "Come on, let's go." Jeanne pulled Marie into the opening in the wall. It was dark. So Jeanne and Marie just felt their way along the wall. Jeanne was leading and feeling the way along the wall, and all of a sudden, they saw a dim light, just like the man had said. It was a 60-watt at the most. And in the light they can see that there's a pathway on the other side, what he called the left branch. Jeanne said, "Oh, there's the left branch, so we're okay." So they kept walking. Where the light was, you made a little bend in the road, in the tunnel. And when you follow that little bend, you suddenly see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so Jeanne and Marie, taking the branch to the right, saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and then they ran. They reached the entrance to the tunnel, and they see, parked in front of this exit of the tunnel, the bus, stopped at a stop sign. The people are outside the bus yelling, "Jeanne! Marie!" So Jeanne yelled, "We're here! We're coming!" And they ran all the way to the bus. The guide was there. She said, "We've been looking all over for you. Where have you been?" Jeanne said, "We were in a tunnel." The guide said, "There's no tunnel around here. Get on the bus, we're late." The guide was really upset, and with due reason, because usually, if you're not there on time for the bus, they leave without you. So Jeanne and Marie sat on the bus and said, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you, St. Anthony." We asked Jeanne a couple of questions after she told us her story, and she gave us some interesting answers. We asked what the man looked like, and Jeanne told us that he looked like he was probably in his 40s, and that he had fair hair. He was dressed in brown traveler's clothes. He was wearing a little brown traveling cape that was popular in Italy at the time, and he was holding a staff in his hand. Another interesting thing about the story, I think, is how the man told Jeanne and Marie where the bus would be stopped outside the tunnel. And the tunnel didn't lead back to where they had left the bus, where they got off the bus. It led to a bus stop where the bus happened to be parked, where the bus happened to be stopped at that moment, and so Jeanne and Marie were able to get onto it. He didn't just tell them how to get back to where they originally were, he told them how to get to the bus where it was at that moment. And I think that's pretty interesting. No one would have been able to know that the bus would happen to be stopped outside of the tunnel at that moment, or that the tunnel would even lead to where the bus would be. So I think that's pretty clear that it wasn't a normal person. I do think that they met St. Anthony. And stories like these are good reminders for us that we are not alone. God and his saints are with us, and they do care about us, and they will help us. So, if you're lost in Italy, don't stay lost in Italy. Ask for some help, and the Lord and his saints will be happy to provide it. So with Jeanne we say, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you, St. Anthony."